Rain slams against a biker clubhouse at midnight. No one knocks there. Ever. But tonight, 3 soft knocks break the rule. A bruised little girl stands alone, shaking. She whispers 5 words that freeze every man inside. They beat my mama. This wasn't random. Her mother saw something she wasn't supposed to. And the mistake? She trusted the wrong silence. Because now the men who hurt her are coming back, and the door has already been answered. So what happens when predators pick the wrong family? Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. Now back to the story. The storm arrived first. Not gently, not politely. It rolled in low and heavy, pressing down on the city like a clenched fist. Thunder crawled across the sky in long, angry growls. Rain slammed into the streets, bouncing off cracked asphalt and rusted gutters, flooding alleys where no one bothered to look twice. Inside the Devil's Canyon Clubhouse, the storm was background noise. This place had survived worse. The building squatted at the edge of the industrial district, half-shadowed by abandoned warehouses and chain-link fences crowned with barbed wire. The windows were narrow, reinforced, built to keep things out or keep things in. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and old leather. Whiskey glasses clinked. A pool table thudded softly under the weight of slow, lazy shots. Men with scarred knuckles and tattooed arms leaned back in their chairs, trading war stories and insults in voices roughened by years of shouting over engines. This wasn't a bar. This was a line. Nobody crossed it by accident. You didn't knock on this door unless you were invited, desperate, or stupid. Cops knew better. Rivals didn't dare. Regular people avoided the street altogether. That door had rules, and one of them was simple. Nobody knocks. So when it happened, the sound didn't register right away. 3 soft taps. Not loud enough to be a threat. Not bold enough to be a challenge. Just there. Tap, tap, tap. The room didn't freeze immediately. At first, it was just a hiccup in the noise. A pause in a sentence. A missed shot at the pool table. Then someone frowned. Another man lifted his head slowly, eyes narrowing. Boots stopped mid-step. A glass hovered halfway to a mouth. Because everyone felt it at the same time. That knock didn't belong. Thunder cracked outside, shaking the walls, but no one moved. The rain beat harder against the roof, like the storm itself was trying to warn them. Tap, tap, tap. This time, the sound landed. Silence spread through the room, thick and uncomfortable. Chairs creaked as men shifted their weight. A few hands drifted, not consciously, to places where weapons usually rested. Nobody spoke. They didn't have to. The door loomed at the far end of the clubhouse, heavy oak scarred with old impacts, reinforced with steel plates bolted on after past mistakes. It had been kicked in before, shot at, set on fire once, but never knocked on like this. One of the men muttered under his breath, "That ain't right." Another shook his head slowly. Nobody knocks in a storm unless they're running from something. Thunder answered him, loud enough to rattle the light fixtures. A chair scraped back. The club's president stood. He didn't rush, didn't reach for a weapon. He moved with the calm of someone who had learned long ago that panic got people killed. Every eye followed him as he crossed the concrete floor. His boots echoed louder now that the room had gone quiet. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the building itself was holding its breath. He stopped in front of the door. For a moment, he didn't touch it. He listened. Not to the storm. To whatever had driven anyone to this place. Nothing. Just rain. Wind. The low hum of the city beyond the walls. He reached for the handle and pulled. The door opened inward with a slow, reluctant creak. And the world tilted. A child stood on the threshold. Not a teenager. Not someone old enough to know better. A little girl. Maybe 6 years old. She was soaked through, rainwater dripping from her hair and clothes onto the concrete floor. Her sneakers were mismatched, one pink, one gray, and caked with mud. Her arms were wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her body together. Her face, Her face was wrong. A dark bruise bloomed along her cheekbone, purple and swollen. There was a cut on her lip, still fresh, a thin line of red cutting through pale skin. One eye was puffy, half closed. She was shaking, not from the cold, from fear. The room didn't just fall silent. It emptied. Every laugh, every swagger, every trace of bravado drained out of it like water through a cracked pipe. These men had seen bodies. Broken ones. They had seen blood soak into concrete and heard screams echo in alleys. But this didn't belong anywhere near them. The girl looked up. Her eyes were too big for her face, dark and glassy, scanning the room like a trapped animal looking for exits. She took a half step back, as if she expected the door to slam shut in her face. Her small hand clutched a torn pink blanket, frayed at the edges, soaked and dragging on the ground behind her. For a second, no one breathed. Then she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, thin and shaky, almost lost beneath the rain. "They beat my mama." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed like a gunshot. Somewhere in the room, someone swore quietly. Another man looked away, jaw tightening. A third clenched his fists, so hard the scars across his knuckles turned white. The president stayed where he was. He didn't kneel, didn't reach out. He just looked at her. Because in that moment, he understood something with cold, terrifying clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a message that had gone wrong. Kids didn't come here. They were kept away from places like this, by parents, by fear, by the simple instinct to protect innocence from darkness. If a child had made it to this door alone, in the middle of a storm, it meant someone had failed to protect her. Or someone had tried to make sure she never made it anywhere at all. The girl swallowed hard, her lip trembling. She glanced over her shoulder into the rain, as if she expected someone to be standing there, just out of sight. Waiting. They said. Her voice cracked. She stopped, took a breath that hitched halfway in. They said if Mama talked, it would get worse. That was when the president saw it. Not just the bruise. Not just the fear. The knowledge. This little girl knew something she shouldn't. Not because she understood it, but because she had seen it. Unseen men. Voices she recognized. Hands that didn't shake when they hurt people. Tattoos, maybe. Arms marked with symbols she didn't understand but would never forget. And one detail that stuck in her mind because it didn't belong in a nightmare. A smile that flashed gold when it shouldn't have smiled at all. A warning had already been delivered. The beating wasn't random. It was deliberate. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Like the walls were leaning in. One of the men near the bar finally spoke, his voice low and uneasy. "You got a name, kid?" She hesitated. That hesitation told them everything. Names were dangerous. Finally, she whispered it anyway, because she had nowhere else left to go. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time. The president stepped aside. Not as an invitation. As a decision. The girl took one tentative step forward, then another, crossing the threshold into a world she didn't belong in, into a place that ran on violence, loyalty, and lines drawn in blood. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud. And just like that, everything changed. Because whoever had put their hands on a child's mother had made a mistake far bigger than they understood. They hadn't just hurt a woman. They had sent her daughter into the only place left that still believed in lines you do not cross. If you believe children should never pay for adult evil, tap like right now. That's your line in the sand. Because from this moment on, this is no longer just a story about a knock. It's about what happens when monsters make the wrong people listen. The room didn't rush her. That was the first thing the girl noticed. No sudden movement. No barking questions. No hands reaching out to grab or shove or pull. For a place full of men who looked like danger, the stillness was worse. It pressed down on her ears, made her heart thump louder, made every breath feel like it might be her last. The leader stood a few steps away. He was bigger than the others. Not just in size, though his shoulders stretched the seams of his leather jacket, but in gravity. The room bent around him. Conversations waited for him. Decisions belonged to him. She didn't know what a club president was. She didn't know what power looked like. But she knew this man mattered. Their eyes met, and something inside him broke open. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough to let memory bleed through. For a heartbeat, the clubhouse disappeared. He wasn't standing on concrete anymore. He was standing barefoot on a cold linoleum floor, decades earlier, staring at a door that wouldn't close all the way because the frame was warped. Rain rattled against thin windows. The lights flickered, just like they were doing now. He was a child again. Small. Silent. Learning how to make himself invisible. In the next room, his mother cried out. Not screaming, never screaming. She'd learned early that screams made it worse. Instead, there was the dull, hollow sound of something hitting flesh. A grunt. A sharp inhale. Then nothing. He remembered counting the seconds between sounds. If it was quiet too long, he worried she was dead. If it was loud again, he knew she wasn't. No one knocked on that door. No neighbors. No police. No family. Storms came and went, and the world kept turning like nothing was wrong. The memory slammed back into place as he looked at the girl in front of him. Same eyes. Not the color. Hers were darker. But the expression. That careful watchfulness. The way she kept her shoulders slightly hunched, like she was bracing for a blow that might come from any direction. That look didn't belong to a 6-year-old. It belonged to someone who had learned the rules too early. He knelt. The movement was slow, deliberate. He lowered himself until he was eye level with her, the way someone does when they don't want to loom. The room reacted instantly. Men shifted, some uncomfortable, some confused. They had seen this man break bones without hesitation. They had never seen him kneel, for anyone. Up close, the damage was clearer. The bruise on her cheek wasn't just a mark. It was swollen in that way that said it was new, recent. Her lip trembled when she tried to press it together, and there were faint yellow shadows beneath the purple. Older pain trying to fade, only to be replaced. He felt something hot and sharp coil in his chest. "Hey," he said. His voice surprised everyone, including him. It wasn't the voice he used when issuing orders. It wasn't the one that shut rooms down. It was quieter, rougher, like it hadn't been used in a long time. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Of course she did. "Name's got you found." "My mama says not to tell," she whispered. The room held its breath again. He nodded once. "That's okay. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." Her eyes flicked up, searching his face. She was looking for something: anger, trickery, impatience. Adults always had an angle. She didn't find one. "My mama," she started, then stopped. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "She said I had to run. She said don't look back." He swallowed. Another flash of memory, his mother shoving shoes onto his feet with shaking hands, whispering instructions she never got to finish. "Did someone hurt her?" he asked gently. The girl nodded. "Once. Hard." "They were already mad," she said. "Before they hit her." That detail landed wrong. People who lost control didn't start mad. They exploded. This sounded planned. What were they mad about? She shook her head, curls sticking to her damp cheeks. "Mama said she saw something." Something. That word again. It had weight. "Where?" he asked. "At the place with the cars," she said. "The one that smells like oil." The men behind him exchanged looks. Garages. Shops. Places business happened behind half-closed doors. "She wasn't supposed to be there," the girl continued, her voice gaining a strange steadiness, like she'd rehearsed this in her head 100 times. "She said she was just cutting through. But they were there. And they were doing bad things." "What kind of bad things?" one of the men asked before he could stop him. The girl flinched. The leader shot the man a look that could have cracked stone. "It's okay," he said to her. "You don't have to say." She shook her head. "They told her not to talk. They said if she talked, they'd come back." "Come back for who?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. The girl looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "For me." That was it. That was the line. The air in the room changed, not explosively, Not dramatically, but unmistakably. Something settled. A shift from curiosity to certainty. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't a drunk with bad judgment or a bad day that got worse. This was cleanup. Men with tattoos. She'd said that before. Men whose arms told stories without words. Symbols of allegiance. Ownership. Threat. And one of them, she hesitated, then added softly. He had shiny teeth. He smiled when Mama cried. Gold teeth. The detail crawled under his skin. People remembered smiles, especially when they didn't belong. He straightened slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Did your mama ever say what she saw? The girl shook her head. She said it was grown-up stuff. She said I wasn't supposed to know. Smart woman. Deadly mistake. She said we were in trouble, the girl whispered. She said if I ever got away, I had to find someone strong. Strong. Not kind. Not safe. Strong. Her eyes flicked to the room behind him. To the scars. The ink. The weapons barely hidden. You found us, he said quietly. She nodded. Behind them, thunder rolled again, closer now. Rain hammered the roof in heavy sheets, like fists demanding entry. The leader felt the old anger stirring, the kind he'd buried under years of rules and hierarchy. This wasn't rage for power or pride. This was the kind that came from recognition, from knowing exactly what that fear felt like, from remembering how it felt to wait for help that never came. He rose slowly to his feet. The girl tensed instinctively, shoulders tightening. He noticed. I'm not mad at you, he said immediately. I just need to think. She relaxed a fraction. The men watched him carefully now. They could tell something had shifted inside him, even if they didn't understand it yet. He turned his back on the girl, not to abandon her, but to face the room. This wasn't a beating, he said, his voice low and controlled. This was a warning. No one argued. Somebody saw something they weren't meant to see, he continued. And instead of trusting fear to keep her quiet, they sent a message. He glanced back at the girl. They didn't count on her being brave. The girl ducked her head at the word, unsure. Brave didn't feel right when you were just trying to survive. What did she see? One man asked. That's the problem, the leader replied. We don't know yet. Silence followed. Mystery always did this. It stretched, made people uneasy. Unanswered questions were dangerous things. What we do know, he added, is that someone decided a child was leverage. That was when the room turned fully. Not loud. Not violent. Resolute. Because there were rules here too. Lines that even men who lived outside the law didn't cross. Children were one of them. He knelt again, facing the girl. Listen to me, he said. You didn't do anything wrong. Her eyes flicked up, searching. You hear me? He pressed. None of this is your fault. She hesitated, then nodded slowly, like she wanted to believe it but didn't quite know how. What's going to happen to Mama? She asked. The question was soft. It carried everything. He didn't answer right away, because answers were promises, and promises were sacred things. Instead, he said, we're going to figure out what she saw. And the bad men? The girl whispered. He held her gaze. They made a mistake. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But something steadied in her chest. Something about the way he said it. Not loud. Not threatening. Certain. Outside, the storm raged on, unaware that it had just mirrored another, one quieter, deeper, and far more dangerous. Because the moment he recognized that fear, it stopped being her problem alone. It became his. And whoever thought a child could be silenced by violence had just taught the wrong man a lesson he already knew too well. A comment: protect the innocent if you think silence helps abusers. Let them know how many people stand against this. Because every voice that speaks up makes it harder for evil to hide. The rain didn't stop. It softened, thinned, then returned in heavier sheets, like the sky couldn't decide whether to watch or wash everything away. Inside the clubhouse, time moved differently. Slower. Sharper. The girl slept on a couch she didn't belong on, curled around her blanket like it was the last solid thing in the world. One of the men had draped a jacket over her. Leather. Heavy. smelling of oil and smoke. She didn't stir. Exhaustion had dragged her under. The leader stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed, staring at nothing. "All right," he said finally. "We find out what she saw." No speeches. No votes. Just direction. They moved fast. Not in a rush, but with purpose. This wasn't the frantic scrambling of men chasing rumors. This was the calm efficiency of people who understood that the truth, once exposed, never stayed quiet. 2 bikes rolled out first, engines low, cutting through the wet streets toward the industrial strip the girl had described. Another car followed, lights off, hugging the shadows. A 4th man stayed behind, eyes on the door, hand never far from his sidearm. Because one thing was already clear. If someone was willing to beat a woman and threaten a child, they would come back. The garage sat where the city forgot itself. A long, squat building with corrugated metal walls, peeling paint, and a sign so faded it barely read auto repair anymore. The place smelled like oil and rust and old mistakes. A chain-link fence sagged around it, one side bent inward like it had been forced open recently. They parked down the block. No headlights. No talking. The rain helped. It always did. The door to the garage hung open by a few inches, swaying slightly in the wind. One of the men reached out and steadied it before it could creak. Inside, the lights were off. But the smell hit them immediately. Metal.
Oil.
And something coppery that didn't belong.
Blood.
Not pools. Not splatter.
Smears. Dragged. Wiped.
Missed in the cleanup. Someone had tried to erase what happened here. They just hadn't done it well enough. "Check the back," one man whispered. Another moved toward the office. The leader stayed where he was, eyes adjusting to the darkness. He didn't need light to recognize the signs. A knocked-over chair. A cracked phone screen near the wall. Fresh tire marks leading out the rear bay. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution site. In the office, a desk drawer hung open. Papers were scattered, some damp from rain blowing in through a broken window. One of the men crouched and picked something up carefully.
"Boss," he said.
Photographs. Printed. Not digital. The kind you kept when you didn't want a trail. They laid them out on the desk under a single flickering bulb. The first photo showed a man on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. His face was bruised, eyes wide with panic. He was wearing a police jacket. Not just any cop. A detective. The second photo was closer. The same man. Blood on his collar now. Someone stood behind him, only partially visible. A tattooed arm. A watch with a scratched face. The third photo didn't show the man at all. It showed the people watching. 3 men. Relaxed. Smiling. One of them had gold teeth that caught the light even in the grainy image. The leader stared at that smile. It matched the girl's description perfectly. "That's him," one of the men said quietly. "Cartel muscle. Name's Vega." The name landed heavy. Vega didn't just work for the cartel. He enforced its silences. Witnesses disappeared wherever he went. Not just rivals. Not just criminals. Anyone who saw too much. The fourth photo was the worst. The detective lay face down on the concrete. Still. Lifeless. The angle told the story without needing details. The men around him were already turning away, bored. Finished. The leader exhaled slowly. "A cop," someone muttered. That explains the confidence. And the brutality. They weren't just cleaning up a loose end. They were sending a message to anyone who thought the badge meant protection. "Why take pictures?" another man asked. "Insurance," the leader replied. Or leverage. Proof that the job was done. Proof that could also become a liability. Which means the man trailed off. Which means whoever took these didn't mean for anyone else to ever see them, the leader finished. The girl's mother hadn't just walked in on a crime. She had walked in on evidence. They searched the rest of the garage carefully. In the back room, they found it. A trail of blood leading to a half-clean drain. A rag stuffed into the grate, soaked through. Nearby, a phone lay smashed against the wall, but not before it had done its job. One of the men crouched, pried it open, and pulled the memory card. Smart woman, he said under his breath. She knew, the leader replied. She knew exactly what she'd seen. A cartel execution, a corrupt cop, and faces that weren't supposed to exist outside whispers. That was why they hadn't just threatened her. That was why they had beaten her. That was why they would come back. They returned to the clubhouse before dawn. The storm had eased into a steady drizzle, but the tension inside had only tightened. The girl was awake now, sitting upright on the couch, eyes following every movement. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the night had finally settled on her shoulders. The leader approached slowly and sat across from her. Your mama is brave, he said. Her fingers tightened in the blanket. She didn't do anything wrong, did she? The girl asked. No, he answered honestly. She did the right thing. The girl frowned. Then why are they mad? Because the world doesn't always reward courage. But he didn't say that. Because bad people don't like being seen, he said instead. She considered this, then nodded. It made sense to her in the way hard truths sometimes do. Are they going to come here? She asked. The men in the room exchanged looks. Yes, the leader said. Not to scare her. To respect her. They know you're alive, he continued. And that means they'll want to finish what they started. The word finish hung in the air. The girl's eyes widened, not with panic this time, but with understanding. They don't like witnesses, she whispered. No, he agreed. They don't. One of the men stepped forward. Boss, he said quietly. We intercepted a call. Vega's crew is moving. Asking questions. The leader didn't react outwardly. Inside, something hardened. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over. This wasn't a threat that could be negotiated away. This was a network. A cartel that killed witnesses. A corrupt system that protected itself. Men who believed fear was enough to keep the world quiet. And now they knew a child had slipped through their fingers. That makes it official, one of the bikers said. They're not backing off. The leader nodded once. This is no longer protection, he said. It's war. The word didn't carry excitement. It carried inevitability. Because war had rules. And the first rule was simple. If you come for the innocent, you answer to everyone who refuses to look away. He looked at the girl again. Not as a victim, but as the reason the line had been crossed. Somewhere out there, Vega and his network were moving pieces, confident in their reach, convinced that fear would finish the job. They were wrong. And for the first time since the knock at the door, the monsters were no longer hidden. They had names. They had faces. And they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. If you can't stand traffickers, abusers, or anyone who hurts kids, subscribe now. Stories like this don't let monsters hide. The cartel didn't panic. They never did. Panic was for amateurs, small crews, desperate men, people who reacted instead of planned. This was different. This was an organization that had buried problems for years and slept just fine afterward. So when word reached them that the girl was alive, they didn't raise their voices. They mobilized. Phones lit up across the city. Short calls. Coded language. Names that didn't exist on paper were spoken just once, then never again. Money moved quietly, fast enough to make it feel like it had always been there. Bounties were placed. Not shouted. Not advertised. Whispered. Enough cash to make loyalty flexible. Enough to make questions inconvenient. Enough that anyone who stumbled onto the answer might decide it was worth selling. And then the message went out to the people who mattered most. The clubhouse is marked. I started watching it from a distance. Cars slowed when they passed. A delivery truck idled too long at the corner. Men with nothing to do suddenly found reasons to linger nearby. Predators circled. Inside the clubhouse, the mood shifted. Not to fear. To readiness. Weapons were checked, not displayed. Positions discussed, not argued. Every man in the room understood the unspoken truth. This wasn't about territory or pride. This was about a child. And somewhere out there, her mother was still breathing, or she wouldn't be leverage anymore. The leader stood over a map spread across the table. A single finger tapped a warehouse near the docks, an unremarkable building in an area full of them. No sign. No windows. Just concrete and steel and secrecy. That's where they're holding her, he said. No one asked how he knew. The cartel had patterns. They always did. Places that sat close to escape routes. Buildings owned by shell companies that folded the moment questions were asked. They'll move her soon, one man said. They won't, the leader replied. Not yet. Why not? Because they think we're still reacting. That was the cartel's mistake. They assumed fear bought time. It didn't. It bought clarity. The plan came together without drama. 2 teams. One objective. No room for improvisation. They would strike first, not loudly, not recklessly, but precisely. Fast enough to end it before the cartel could tighten its grip. Clean enough that the message couldn't be misinterpreted. This wasn't a warning. This was an answer. The warehouse crouched near the water, its edges softened by fog rolling in off the docks. Sodium lights cast long, sickly shadows across the concrete. Somewhere nearby, a ship's horn sounded, low, distant, unconcerned. 2 guards stood outside the side entrance. Relaxed. That was always the tell. Men guarding something important didn't relax unless they believed no one was coming. The bikers moved in silence, boots barely disturbing gravel. One guard noticed movement a second too late, just long enough to register surprise before strong hands disarmed and pinned him. The other turned, reaching for his radio. He never got the chance. The door opened. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with oil and dampness. The lights were low. A single bulb flickered near the back, illuminating a chair bolted to the floor. And her. The woman's head lifted weakly at the sound. Her face was swollen, bruised, marked by exhaustion rather than spectacle. Her hands were bound, wrists raw, but her chest rose and fell in shallow, stubborn breaths. She was alive, broken but breathing. That was enough. A shout echoed from deeper inside the warehouse. Too late. The bikers moved like a single organism, controlled, deliberate. Gunfire cracked the air, sharp and final, echoing off concrete walls. No chaos. No spray of violence. Just action. Somewhere outside, an alarm began to wail. Sirens answered it in the distance. Too far away to matter yet. Close enough to start the clock. Seconds mattered now. One man cut the restraints. Another supported the woman as her legs buckled beneath her. She tried to speak, failed, tried again. My daughter, she croaked. She's safe, the leader said, steady and certain. We've got her. Tears welled in her eyes, not loud, not dramatic. Just relief crashing into pain. More footsteps thundered from the far end of the warehouse. The cartel was responding. Not panicking. Focusing. Bullets chipped concrete near the door. Someone yelled orders in Spanish. The bikers returned fire just long enough to create space, no more than necessary. This wasn't a siege. It was an extraction. They moved fast, shielding the woman, retreating the way they'd come. Outside, engines roared to life, cutting through the fog like a challenge. Sirens were closer now. Red and blue lights flickered against the fog, painting the night in pulses. Move, someone shouted. They did. Tires screamed against wet pavement as the bikes peeled away, splitting in different directions, confusing pursuit, erasing patterns. Behind them, the warehouse fell silent again. But the message had already been delivered. Across the city, phones rang. Vega answered his with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What? He snapped. The voice on the other end was tight, controlled, afraid. They got her. The smile vanished. They breached the warehouse, the voice continued. They were in and out before we could lock it down. Silence stretched. Not shock. Calculation. How many? Vega asked. Enough, came the reply. Vega closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't supposed to happen. Witnesses didn't get rescued. Children didn't bring wolves to the door. You said the clubhouse was marked, he said slowly. It was. Then you underestimated them. A pause. They're not supposed to do this, the voice said. They're bikers. Thugs. Vega's jaw tightened. No, he replied. They're family, and family was dangerous. He hung up without another word. Outside, the city kept moving. Traffic lights changed. Bars closed. People went home unaware that a quiet line had been crossed and answered. Back at the clubhouse, the door opened again. This time it wasn't a knock. The woman was carried inside, wrapped in blankets, supported on either side. The girl looked up from the couch, and for one frozen second, neither moved. Then the girl ran. She slammed into her mother's chest, sobbing, clinging like she might disappear if she let go. The woman wrapped her arms around her daughter with what strength she had left, whispering her name over and over like a prayer. The room looked away. Even men who had faced death without flinching gave them that moment. The leader stood back, watching. This wasn't revenge. No one cheered. No one celebrated. This was protection, plain and simple. Because somewhere out there, a cartel enforcer with gold teeth had just learned a truth he'd never bothered to consider. Some families don't scare easily. Some lines don't blur. And when predators come for family, they don't always find victims waiting. Sometimes, they find resistance. Comment "no more monsters" if you believe evil should fear consequences. Your comment equals choosing a side. The door closed quietly this time. No storm pounding against it. No fear riding in on the rain. Just a soft, final click that marked the end of one moment and the beginning of something far harder to name. Inside the clubhouse, the lights were dimmed. Not for secrecy, but for gentleness. Someone had turned off the radio. The usual hum of engines and laughter was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost fragile, like it could shatter if handled too roughly. The mother sat on the couch with her daughter curled against her side. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The girl's face was pressed into her mother's shoulder, breathing her in as if memorizing the proof that she was real.
Alive. Warm. Still here.
Her small fingers clutched the fabric of her mother's shirt with quiet urgency, afraid that letting go, even for a second, might undo everything. The mother stroked her daughter's hair slowly, carefully, as though afraid sudden movement might break the spell. Her hands trembled, not from pain this time, but from the effort of staying present, of letting herself believe that this moment wasn't about to be stolen away. Tears slid down her cheeks in silence. Not sobs. Not breakdown. Just the quiet release of someone who had carried terror alone for too long. Around them, hardened men stood awkwardly, uncertain where to put their hands or their eyes. They had faced consequences before, legal ones, violent ones, but this was different. This was the aftermath of choosing a side. The leader stood near the door, arms folded, watching without intruding. This was not his victory. It never was. It belonged to the child who knocked, to the woman who refused to stay silent, to the thin, stubborn thread of hope that had survived where it shouldn't have. A medic moved quietly, checking the woman's injuries without asking unnecessary questions. No clipboards, no forms, just care. Someone brought water. Someone else offered a clean blanket. The girl looked up once, eyes swollen but steady. "Are they gone?" she asked. The room went still again. The leader stepped closer, keeping his voice low. "For now." She nodded, accepting the truth as it was, not softened, not dressed up. "Will they come back?" she asked. Her mother's hand paused. The leader didn't rush his answer. "People like that don't forget," he said carefully. "But they don't get to decide everything." The girl considered this. Children were better at holding complicated truths than adults gave them credit for. She leaned back against her mother, satisfied for the moment. Later, when the worst of the shock had eased, the girl sat at a small table near the corner of the room. Someone had found crayons. A stack of scrap paper appeared without explanation. She worked quietly, tongue pressed against her lip in concentration. Lines took shape. Not chaotic. Not angry. Careful. She drew people first, simple figures holding hands in a wide circle. Then she added color. Bright, deliberate strokes. Blues and greens and reds layered, without hesitation. Finally, she drew a rainbow arching over them all. It wasn't perfect. The lines wobbled. The colors overlapped. but it was unmistakably hopeful. She held it up when she finished, turning it toward her mother. "It's us," she said. "And them." "Who's them?" her mother asked softly. "The people who helped," the girl replied. Her mother smiled, small, tired, but real. The leader saw the picture from across the room. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, because it wasn't just a drawing. It was a declaration that after fear, something else could still exist. That violence hadn't been the final author of this story. He looked around the clubhouse, the scars on the walls, the men who had lived their lives being feared rather than trusted, and felt the weight of what had been set in motion. The cartel had been exposed. Not dismantled. Not erased. Exposed. And that mattered. Because organizations built on fear depended on shadows. On people looking away. On witnesses believing silence was safer than truth. That illusion was gone now. A mother had seen something she wasn't meant to. A child had refused to disappear. And a door that never opened had opened once. That was enough to change the math. But it came with a cost. Everyone in that room understood it. A cartel humiliated didn't fade quietly. It adapted. It waited. The war wasn't over. It had simply stepped into the light. The leader knew this. He felt it in the pit of his stomach, the way you feel an incoming storm before the clouds arrive. Retaliation wouldn't be immediate. It would be patient.
Strategic.
That was the price of answering the door. He accepted it without regret. Because some choices once made rewrote who you were. As dawn approached, pale light crept through the narrow windows, cutting soft lines across the floor. The city outside stirred back to life, unaware of how close it had come to losing something irreplaceable. The girl yawned, finally heavy with sleep. Her mother held her close. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, not as a promise to the world, but as a commitment to herself. The girl nodded, already drifting. The picture lay on the table beside them, crayon colors glowing faintly in the early light. Hope didn't arrive loudly. It never did. It arrived quietly, in moments like this, when someone chose not to look away, when fear didn't get the final word, when a child learned that monsters could be challenged. The leader opened the door once more, just enough to let fresh air in. Then he closed it again. Not to shut the world out, but to protect what was inside. Because someone had knocked, and someone had answered. And that made all the difference. Share the story if you believe protecting the innocent is everyone's responsibility. And if you stand against bullies, traffickers, and abusers, you already know which side you're on. Some doors stay closed forever. This one didn't. Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you enjoy stories told like a movie, click on subscribe for more powerful stories.